I've always known that I was adopted, but I've never had that moment with my parents where they sat me down and they're like, "You're adopted." It's kind of weird knowing that my birth mom lived in the same town as me, because apparently, hearing from my dad now, she's been around a lot, like around my school events, sporting events. Like, she just kind of pops up every which way, and it's just weird having someone there that's part of your life that you don't even know about. If I wasn't adopted, my life would be extremely different. I probably wouldn't be...
Actually, my wife, Debbie, I came home from work one day and she said, "We're going to a meeting tonight." And we just got married. We hadn't been married long at all. And I said, "What are you talking about?" She had been watching Good Company on television, and they had a thing on there about independent adoption. And she was interested in it, so we went and spent $25 to get associated with this group. And it was an informational session, and we got involved with it through that. And just by coincidence, a couple weeks later, we got involved in our first adoption with our son, and went through the pregnancy with his mother and the delivery, and brought him home, and that was our first experience with adoption. He was about 20 months of age when Dani came into the picture.
We adopted a child, Gregory, and the word got out that we may be looking for another child, and your birth mother came actually and knocked on our front door and informed us that she was pregnant and asked if we would be willing to adopt.
In our case, my wife Debbie has a biological child who's 30 years old, and he's my stepson. And I had never had a biological child, and Debbie had some cancer issues, and they had to do some surgery that made it impossible for her to get pregnant. So we just looked at that as an option. And like I say, she saw this thing on TV one day, and we went to the meeting, and just a few months later, we were in the middle of it.
Based on a bout with cancer, and I was unable to have any children, Steve and I wanted to have kids.
Well, as I was told, I was put down. I was sitting on a street corner, and there's a sign that said I'm adoptable. No, actually, I was told that they actually knocked on our front door and asked if they'd adopted my brother, which they did, and they kind of went through a whole other process that I don't know much about.
The real story is we were at home one night, cold of the winter, living out on the island, which is a very hard place to find find where we lived. There's a knock on the door at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and there's a young girl and an elderly woman standing there. And she said, "Are you Steve Graham?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I understand you adopt children." And I said, "Well, I don't know if that's a business we're in." I said, "We have an adopted child, but I don't know, where's this coming from?" Well, Dani's birth mom had ran into the birth mother of our first adopted child, being they all live in this community, and she was pregnant, 17 years old, in high school, not in a good position to raise a child, and so she talked with Greg's birth mom, and Greg's birth mom said, "We went through this process and it was great and it worked well, and maybe you should pursue it." So she sought us out, and she came over and we chatted a little bit, and a couple days later we chatted some more, and we hired attorneys for both of us, and away we went. And she had some intestinal problems where she couldn't digest food right, and we had her in special formula, and she was one irritable young girl for 8.5 months. And it was just like one day, like you had turned off a switch in her, it just stopped. And I don't think she's been in a bad mood since that day. She's totally changed, and I can't explain it.
Honestly, you had medical issues, and you were very difficult. Dad and I worked opposite shifts, so we wouldn't have to spend money on daycare, and it was a trying time for the first 18 months.
Tough. Dani was colicky for the first 8.5 months of her life, and I'd come home from work. My wife would hand Dani to me, and she would leave for a while.
Well, your birth mother was 17 at the time you were born, and she just, number one, couldn't afford it. Number two, was not in a position to raise a child. And I think even at this stage, I believe that you would be growing up with a single mom. I know she was married at one time after you were born, and has a couple kids currently, but again, she's a single mom again. So
if I wasn't adopted, I probably wouldn't have as good of a family as I do now. I think adoption's a good thing, even if it's an animal. The animal's just gonna get put down, and if it's a child, they'll just end up in a foster home, and that's no good for anybody, really.
Boy, that's a tough one. We do know Dani's birth mom, and I know she's considerably younger than I am, and at the time Dani was born, she struggled, financially. It just wasn't there, and emotionally and whatever. She just wasn't ready for a child, and she knew it. And I think she made a wonderful choice, and I think Dani's been exposed to a lot more things in life with us than her mom could have probably afforded. Mom's a great lady, but she just wasn't in a position to afford some of the things that we've been able to do with Dani, and the places we've gone, and and exposed her to a lot of different things. I think that's been an improvement. Whether it's, we love her, adoption isn't even a word used around here much. They grew up with the adoption creed hanging over their bed. They knew they were adopted, but it made no difference to us. Adopted, biological, it's a non-issue to us.
I think there's several kids out there that don't stand a chance in life because they aren't adopted, and they are given up to foster care, and they may spend years jumping from house to house. I personally think it's a great thing because there are parents like us that didn't have or weren't able to have children biologically, and this gave us an opportunity to have a couple kids.
That's kind of a tough question. I'm absolutely an advocate for adoption. I think people who choose to terminate a child, a pregnancy or whatever, when there's so many willing people that would adopt and care and take care of those people and raise them, I can't understand people who choose to go in other directions. And I'm an absolute advocate for adoption.
I think it's a good thing. I like adoption. If adoption wasn't here, I wouldn't be where I am today. Or maybe I wouldn't even be here.